Hello you, and welcome back to Let's Play a Kerbal Space Program. My name is Satchmo, and this is episode 17. Today we're going to Duna, so we're going to pull up our Delta V map, and we're going to try to figure out exactly how to do that. We're going to be landing on Duna, so we're going to have to add in all the numbers going there, save for a few that have the little deltas next to them, because those can be arrow braked away. We talked about this in the previous episode, so if you see as I'm adding up here, I'm not going to be adding in all the numbers on the way to Duna, but I will be adding them all in on the way back, because of course you can't arrow brake on the way home. Until you get to Kerbal, of course, but you can arrow brake in that atmosphere. So, going there, we're going to be subtracting the arrow braking on the target, and then coming home, we're going to be subtracting the arrow braking numbers on the way back. I do tend to add in a little bit. Here I'm adding in the 950 circularization delta V. That's just going to help me kind of with my margins, and of course I add 10%, giving me a total here of 9 grand. And the craft I'm going to build, I think, is not actually going to have 9 grand worth of fuel in it, but it's a good number to shoot for. First, we're going to go to R&D real quick, and we're going to grab the mobility enhancer. This little ladder is going to help us get down onto the surface of Duna a little bit easier. You can do it with jetpacks on Duna. Other planets you cannot, because the thrust of the jetpack isn't enough to actually lift you off the planet. So it's a good idea to get in the habit of bringing ladders with you. Anyway, we're going to speed through the process here. It's pretty clear now that this is a voiceover because I'm talking, the game is going really fast and I'm not talking that fast. So at any rate, I am having to do this as a voiceover for several reasons. We'll get to a little bit more of that later. Anyway, here I am building the upper stage. And you can see I'm using those Pegasus mobility enhancers, I believe they're called. And then the retractable mobility enhancer right there is the one that I want, not that first one. It's not long enough. And before we do anything else, I'm moving all the science nearer the ladder so that the scientists I'm going to be bringing with me can access them from the ladder. Something to think about. It seems I misclicked a rung, so I add it and then I test it again. So the important part here is that I'm doing all the testing at the launch site. I don't want to have to do any kind of testing. I don't want any surprises when I get to Duna is my point. So it's a good idea to build everything, unload it on the launch pad or on the runway and test it here rather than make those mistakes down the road. At any rate, I'm happy with the upper stage there. So I go ahead and I build my transfer stage, which is pretty simple, just the portal and one of those rockets. A quick edit while I went back to go grab those big, those 3-tiered fuel cores that you're seeing me add on right there. I had to go back to R&D and grab those because I forgot it the first time. And then it's pretty typical. You strut it up, you put the fins on. Here I'm adding the nose cones with the fuel inside. There are aerodynamic nose cones under the aerodynamic section, but then there are those as well which do have fuel. So I'm opting for those. My thrust to weight ratio is fantastic, so there's no reason for me to not add a little bit of extra delta V if I can. And you see that I don't quite hit my 9,000 mark, but we get pretty close. Next thing we're going to do is I'm going to open up a mod that I had installed called Transfer Window Planner. There's also an online version of this. I'll try to put a link in the description if you don't want to download the mod. But anyway, it's going to help you see when to actually go to Duna, like when to actually do it and in what direction to fire. So we set Kerbal as a target with an initial orbit of 100, Duna with an orbit of 0 because we're going to be landing on it. We click plot, and you see here I'm pointing at the menu, which that dark blue zone is the correct window for us to go because it's going to require the least amount of delta V. You click the little toggle details button in the bottom right hand corner and you get 3 pieces of information: the prograde, the normal, and the departure date over here. I'm underlining with the mouse right now. You see that it tells us that if we launch year 16, day 197 at 4:59, then that's going to be the correct time for us to launch. Those 2 planets, the Duna and Kerbal, are going to be in the correct orientation with respect to each other. The prograde delta V for that is going to be 1023. The normal is going to be 54.5. And if you punch those into a maneuver and you move the maneuver just the right spot, then you should get intercept with Duna. Here I'm just going to time warp through all the time, put the correct crew on board, and launch the vessel. So I time warped till I got pretty close to that year 16, day 197. I went a couple days early, so I had time to get up in orbit. And now here we get to see a nice launch. Really happy with this one. It's a beautiful craft. It flies gorgeous, and I was able to get a nice little gravity turn here and a very efficient launch. A little bit better than I was even expecting. I still don't have a whole ton of the tree unlocked, even though we have thousands of science points in the bank. I'm still using kind of the most primitive technology available to me at the time. So we see the circularization there only took about 400 meters a second, if I read that number correctly. And that's pretty good circularization. So I'm happy with that. Again, we need to be, the math that the mod did was on us being in a circular orbit at 100 kilometers. So we need to make sure that we're actually in a circular orbit at 100 kilometers. Otherwise, the transfer window planner mod will not work. Here I'm switching over to universal time as opposed to the mission elapsed time. And I'm just going to be time warping forward until we get a little bit closer to that time. Again, it was 16 years, day 197. Now, what we're going to find out here in a minute is that it's that's assuming that your craft is at the specific place where it needs to be at that specific time. And of course, that's not actually going to happen because your craft is up there just spinning around the planet. And it's hard to get those things aligned properly. So we're going to have to move the maneuver node just a little bit to make sure it actually works. We're not going to actually launch at 459, although it is ideal that you do so. And if you look right here in the maneuver node editor, you can see that as I pull prograde out, those numbers start increasing, and you can see the individual components of that vector, whatever vector you're adding. So here I'm just going to pull the prograde out until I hit that target of 1023, and which of course would give me 1023 total delta V of burn. It's going to take me a second just to get just on it. There we go. And then now I'm going to pull up the normal until we get to that 54.5. And you can see as I pull the normal, the prograde delta V doesn't change, but the normal one does. So this is the little editor that you want to be using here. This is the GUI, what I'm trying to say, that you want to be using to make sure that all these numbers are matching up. So if you have the prograde and the normal right, and you are launching at the correct time, we should get an intercept with Duna. And what's more, it should be a very efficient intercept with Duna. There's inefficient ways to do this. And then there's this way. This is the correct way. This is the way that a real-life space astronaut would do this. This is, or a space agency. I guess the individual astronauts probably don't do this, but this is what NASA does as well. We have to wait until the proper time before we do something like launch something to Mars, because you save a lot of fuel and energy. So anyway, now that I have the numbers correct, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to adjust the position. Excuse me. And you see, as I'm adjusting position, we'll start getting a close approach. There it is. And I'll keep moving it until I finally get an intercept. And there we are. And it's for only 1025 meters a second too, which is pretty good. Now, I'm not going to fiddle with this intercept at all. I'm just, so long as I get an intercept, I'm happy with that. It costs just over $1,000 to actually get there. So, very happy with that. In fact, I'm going to be able to do it on this early stage as well. So I'm not even going to have to break off that bottom core, the core that's circularized our orbit over Kerbal, until the very end of the burn. So that's exactly what you're looking for here. Anyway, move over to the maneuver node and complete the burn. Switching to that transfer stage now, of course, and just when we're getting close, I'm throttling down as much as I can to get this intercept just perfect. And then there we go. I see that I get that purple marker there that tells me that I'm actually getting the intercept, and I'm happy with that. So I'm going to time warp out. Yeah, there we are. I'm just pointing it out to you. And then we're going to time warp out until we leave Kerbin's SOI. No reason for us to be here anymore. And we're going to set up a maneuver that's going to get us a little bit closer to Duna. So this is a good opportunity for us to talk a little bit about Duna. Duna is, of course, the kind of the Mars analog in Kerbal Space Program. It's their red planet, just like it's our red planet. It is different in several ways, but it is, again, the Mars analog, and it is, just like for us, it is the first planet most people go after they are done with the moons of Kerbal. It also has an atmosphere. It's an atmosphere that's quite a lot thinner than Kerbin's atmosphere, but it does have an atmosphere. So I don't think it has oxygen, though, so you can't use jet planes on it, but you can use parachutes, and you can also use the atmosphere to air brake. Again, at other planets you can't do that, but on Duna you can. So that was a feature that we will be exploiting here in this mission for sure. And pretty much any mission that we do to go to Duna, we're going to be aerobraking. Save yourself a lot of fuel doing that. Here I'm just tweaking that approach. I set up a maneuver about midway between Kerb and Duna. And I'm just getting that marker pretty close to Duna. You'll see in a minute I go up there to check the little info panel on Duna. And it's over there on the right. It's the eye on the right side of the screen. And it tells me that Herrmann's atmosphere starts at 50 kilometers. So I want to get down below 50 if I can. I don't want to get too deep to where I will burn up in the atmosphere, of course. But there we have. I have an approach of 62 kilometers. I guess I'm happy with that. I'm going to use that to actually circularize. The deeper you are in the well, of course, the more efficiently you can circularize around the planet. And then I'm going to lower that number down into the atmosphere and aerobrake a lot of that delta V off. So focusing the view on Duna and just pulling that in. There we go, right there. Yeah, very happy with that. So now I'm just going to warp until we actually enter Duna's SOI. Now at this point, I think everything that we've done is something that we've done several times, because we did essentially all of this whenever we went to the moon and to Minmus. We're just intercepting another body and kind of adjusting our approach to where we're happy with it. There I am right here checking the information of Duna. And then there it is right there. It's atmosphere height of 50 kilometers. So I had it down to about 50, 58, 59. So now I'm just going to burn a little bit radial in to push us inside that atmosphere. And of course you want to be careful. Actually, I don't do it right here. I might do it later. You want to be careful, of course, to not go so deep in the atmosphere that you burn up, because you are at this point going pretty quick. In fact, I'm going 1,500 meters a second, 1,600 meters a second now. However, Duna's atmosphere, though it starts at 50 kilometers, doesn't actually get thick until you're kind of down in the 20s. And you'll see it here in a minute when I start using this aerobraking maneuver, or the aerobraking process as a whole. I'm a little bit conservative with it, and it does slow me down, but it takes a lot of passes. I'm going to edit some of those out, but it takes several passes to go through this atmosphere and lower my apoaps, and then go through the atmosphere and lower my apoaps. And it just kind of keeps happening over and over and over again until I've bled off enough of my speed to where I'm happy with the landing. What I'm trying to say is here, when I lower down my periapsis, you can probably go down in the 30s if you are maybe a beginner, and maybe the late 20s if you're a little bit more of an advanced player. And of course, this all depends on your ship and how fast you're going, where you're coming from, and so on and so forth. At any rate, I did it very conservatively to start with. I think I come down to 38. Yeah. Come down to about 38 kilometers, and it does work, but it brings my apoapsis down very slowly. Now, something else that can happen, and we'll see that happen here in a minute, is that Ike, the moon of Duna, tends to kind of be a problem. If you're coming in an equatorial orbit like I am, Ike will get in your way. Oh, there it is right there. In fact, because of that aerobraking that's happening, we managed to get an intercept with Ike. So what I have to do here is I have to do a little bit of a burn to make sure I don't get an intercept with Ike. And I've played this game before where it's like I get an intercept and then I burn, and then the next time around I get another intercept and I try to burn to correct it, and another one. And every time you get an intercept with Ike, if you actually do the intercept, then of course it just throws your orbit somewhere funky, and that's no good. So since I have a lot of fuel on the plane, or on the plane, on the ship, I just went ahead and reduced my apoapsis such that even if Ike is nearby, I'm still not going to get an intercept with him. So at this point, I just spun around the planet and around the planet and around the planet over and over again, every time decreasing my apoapsis. Now I'm going to edit out a lot of this because it took me quite a while to do, but it's a very conservative and very safe way to do it. If this is the way that you would like to play the game, you can spend as long as you like going around and around the planet, slowly bleeding off all that delta V. Eventually, I got to a periapsis I was happy with, and I was going slow enough, and I had plenty enough fuel to where I thought, okay, let's just go ahead and bring this guy down. And so you do your typical deorbit maneuver, you face retrograde, and you fire up the engines. We're going to burn off all of this stage, and it's going to kill our velocity as much as we possibly can. And then the second stage we're going to use to kill off all of our horizontal velocity. So you see me there switch to surface mode. And once I eject this, in fact, I'm going to kind of fling it away from the craft. Here we are. I just kind of take it and fling it down like that, just to make sure that it's out of the way of the craft. And then we're going to go back onto that retrograde marker. I'm going to arm all of my parachutes as well. Now, again, the atmosphere on Duna is quite a lot thinner than Kerbal, so the parachutes aren't going to work as well. Keep that in mind whenever you're designing. You may want more parachutes than you would normally put on a craft this size, and then it's something you really can't test on Kerbal because it just doesn't work the same way. So be a little bit conservative with your parachutes. But anyway, since I have the parachutes, I'm not going to kill all of my lateral velocity. I'm going to let the parachutes kind of do that for me. Kind of have a pendulum type effect, and it's going to swing the rear of that spaceship underneath. I do kind of come in hot, but the combination of the parachutes with the rocket really slows you down pretty efficiently. And there we go. Even though you're coming in hot, you pretty much come to a stop when those parachutes are fully deployed. And then there we go. Of course, it lifts up on the nose of the craft, turning me vertical. And yes, 16.3 meters a second, so it shouldn't have to do any kind of suicide burn or anything like that. We'll do a little bit of a propulsive landing, because 16.2 meters a second is still enough to crush those legs. I want to be around 5. 5 meters a second or lower would be nice. So there we go, do a couple little bursts there, and then I'll just kind of baby it. I'm getting around 5, and there we go. And just doing what I can to keep my ship upright as I kind of bounce around on that spongy Duna surface. It kind of takes a minute to finally settle out, but I landed on a relatively flat area, which is nice. I get a pretty little picturesque view of Ike in the background, of course, with Kerbal. And we pull out the Kerbals and we get all of our signs from it. So nice little screenshot moment. If you haven't been to Duna before, you should be very proud. This is quite an accomplishment when you're playing the game to finally go to another entire planet. The moon is one thing, but a planet is another. There we go. I just get the engineer out and I pack up all the parachutes because we're going to be using those again when we go home. Then I get the scientist out and collect all the science, and I hop him out on the surface. In fact, we're going to go ahead and bring everybody down onto the surface and take a little bit of a group picture. Bill on the way down says, "Why don't you guys close those doors?" There we go. Stand there in front of the thing and plant a flag down. As per usual, we're just going to name it LZ1 to let ourselves know in the future that that's where we landed for the first time. And Bill's going to say, "This place is red." Keen observation, Bill. Now, just for fun, we're going to have them jetpack back into the ship, just to see if the jetpacks are strong enough on this planet. And indeed, they are. You can tell it's quite a lot harder than it is on the moon or on Minmus, but it is possible to actually jetpack down. And therefore, you don't really need these ladders like I brought with me. It's not a bad idea to have them, especially if you run out of monopropellant. But strictly speaking, you don't actually need them. But again, we're going to try to form good habits here. Now, Jebediah, try to do a cool little flip for Jebediah. See if he can be a little Flash. And unfortunately, he kind of spun out. And then we go back and we land over here. So even though he was trying to show off, he probably shouldn't have done that. It wasn't in the mission profile, and he kind of paid for it. So anyway, get all 3 of them back on the ship. And then, we're going to go home. Nothing else to do here. Not a whole lot to look at, just kind of red, barren emptiness. Quick edit while I tend to my daughter in real life, and I'm going to pull up the transfer window planner. And we're going to do the same thing in reverse. We're going to go Duna at 100. Do I do 100 here? I think I corrected it. Yeah, here we go. I'll bring it down to like 70 or something. And then Kerbal at 0, because we're going to be landing on it. And then we're going to leave the departure date alone. If there's a reason that you need to leave earlier or come back earlier or whatever else, then you can feel free to change those departure dates. But I'm going to give it that the range that it already has and see what it's going to pick the best spot within that window to see when would be the most efficient place to launch. The same thing is going to give us our ejection prograde, our ejection normal, which here is represented as a negative number, so it's actually going to be an anti-normal burn. Keep that in mind. And then it's going to give us a departure date. Now, another cool mod that you can use in this game that makes all this a lot easier I think it's called Kerbal alarm clock, and it'll warp to specific times, or it won't let you warp past a certain time. So you can set the Kerbal alarm clock, and then you can warp, and then you can go make a sandwich or whatever. And when you come back, you won't have passed up those times. So that's pretty cool. Anyway, as per normal here, we're going to go ahead and burn 45 degrees in an easterly direction. Get a little extra science because I noticed that we had it on the way back. And once my apoapsis gets up to that target of 70, we're going to start thinking about our circularization. And there we go. Get a nice little round orbit here. All pretty standard stuff at this point. Like I've mentioned in a previous video, once you've done the maneuvers, like once you've gotten into space, and once you've circularized, and once you've made rendezvous, and once you've changed your inclination, well, those are the things. That's space flight with relation to this game, or in terms of this game. Those are the things that you do. So here we are. We're gonna let Kerb kind of chase his tail a little bit here, and wait till it gets in position with Duna. And there it is. We're in a good place. We're going to set up our our maneuver node. We're going to be setting on the front side of Duna now, because we're going to an inner orbit. Remember, if we're going to an outer orbit, we want to launch with the planet, but if we're going to an inner orbit, we want to launch against the planet. So that's why I put that maneuver node on the front side of the planet. Of course, just moving that maneuver node around to see when you actually get the intercept works just fine too. But if you want to know kind of the why about it, that is why, because you're using the velocity if you're firing with the planet to give you more delta V, and you're fighting the planet on the other side to lose some of that delta V. Anyway, we get our orbit, and then I'm making a small adjustment, a little mid-course adjustment to get us a nice and low periapsis on Kerbin. What was that? I think the number was 59 there. It's going so fast and the resolution's so slow right now. It's hard for me to see these numbers, but I'm sure as you're watching the video, you can see them just fine. And yeah, there we go. We've made it back to Kerb, and it's a lot easier to come back than it is to go sometimes. Of course, provided you've given yourself enough delta V and the correct craft to do so. So now that I've used a little bit of the atmosphere to capture ourselves, I'm going to go to apoapsis, bring down that periapsis, and now we're going to hit the atmosphere a little bit harder and really burn off the rest of this. There's one small slip up that happens here in a moment. You'll see the ship kind of flips out of place. I waited a little too long to start my second burn here. I did a little small burn to capture ourselves a little bit better. I waited a little longer. I waited a little too long on the way down, and you can see that the ship starts kind of flipping out a little bit. And at that point, I just decoupled it because I don't need it anymore. We're going slow enough, and these crew pods are light enough, especially with all the parachutes that I have on. It was really no fear of anything bad happening. So the craft does flip out here just a second, but it's a very minor occurrence in the grand scheme of things. There we go. The camera flips over to show us that we are indeed captured and are heading back to Kerbin for the last time. And, or I should say we're circling around Kerbin for the last time, and we're actually heading back home now. I get the, just to make sure that the staging is correct, because we've already launched the parachutes once. Sometimes if you press spacebar, the parachutes will launch again, and you actually don't want that to happen. You want to decouple first and then do the parachutes. So you see I've manually pinned the decoupler up there so I can just click on it and not have to worry about the staging, just in case the game makes a mistake. And here it is right here. I think this is when the atmosphere gets a little too thick, and the craft doesn't like that, so it starts flipping out. We are coming in quite hot here, but again, the craft is nice and light, and we're facing engine forward, so the engine has a really high heat tolerance. There it is right there. The engine has a fine heat tolerance, but anyway, I just decoupled it, and because of that gumdrop shape that it has, it reorients itself, and I'm able to use the parachutes for a peaceful splashdown. Right, so while we're making our descent down, I mentioned a couple things about the channel. This week has been kind of weird with the editing that I've had to do, and it was a little bit out of my comfort zone. But this is going to be another one of those weird ones where I have to do a voiceover. This is the first time I'm doing a voiceover. I know I'm kind of speaking quickly, but I'm trying to get this relatively long video down to kind of the mid-20s mark. I think it's going to turn out to be about 26 minutes, which is, I'm happy with that. Anyway, I think I'm going to be trying something different for next week's video. So I hope that these weren't too much of a turn off. I will be trying to changing up my style next week. I appreciate it if you've been kind of bearing with me and sticking around. I do genuinely appreciate it. And look at all the science and reputation we got. That was a huge mission for the crew. We got Jeb up to 4 stars. That's awesome. Anyway, do really appreciate it. And yeah, it means a lot to me to have your support. And looking forward to next time. Here I am just kind of scanning through the missions to see what we can do next time. I don't think I find anything here that I'm really crazy about. I do grab the plant the flag on Ike. We might do that. But got a couple cool things lined up for next week. Appreciate you sticking around. Appreciate you hanging out with me. And I hope you enjoyed the video. And I'll see you guys next time. So thanks again.